The sound of high heels clicked on the marble floor as Clara King walked into the tall glass building for the first time in weeks. She looked straight ahead with her head held high and her face like stone. She did not smile. She did not look around. She was the CEO, and she wanted everyone to remember it. Workers at their desks looked up when she passed by. Some nodded. Some whispered. But no one dared to speak to her. Not unless she spoke first. Today was important. She had a big meeting with investors in just 1 hour. She needed everything to be perfect. Her office on the top floor was already clean and cold. The windows stretched from floor to ceiling. She could see the whole city from up here. It made her feel powerful. It made her feel safe. But down below, in the lobby, a man pushed a cart filled with cleaning tools. His name was Daniel. He was the janitor, and he had worked in that building for almost 4 years. Daniel wore old gray shoes and a faded uniform. He kept his head down and worked quietly. No one ever talked to him unless they needed something. Most people never even looked at him. But Daniel did not mind. He had more important things to think about, like picking up his daughter from school, like making sure the rent was paid, like saving money for her birthday next month. He was a single dad, and he worked nights to be home with her during the day. He never complained, not even when he was tired, not even when people were rude. That morning he was mopping the hallway when Clara stepped out of the elevator. She walked fast and did not see the wet floor sign. She almost slipped but caught herself just in time. She looked down at the man with the mop and frowned. He looked up and gave a polite smile. "Good morning, ma'am," he said softly. Clara raised an eyebrow. "He's just a janitor," she said under her breath and walked away. Daniel heard it. He always heard it. People thought janitors could not hear or feel or think. But he could, and her words stayed in his heart like a small cut. He finished cleaning and went back to the supply room. He took a deep breath. He pulled out a small notebook from his pocket. Inside were ideas and drawings and business notes. He wrote in it every night after work. It was his secret dream, to one day build something of his own, something better, something his daughter could be proud of. Back upstairs, Clara sat at her desk, looking through her presentation. It was not ready. She had fired her last assistant just 2 days ago. The charts were messy. The numbers did not add up. Her hands began to shake just a little. She hated asking for help. She had built her company alone, brick by brick, step by step, and no one was going to see her weak. But in that moment, she did not feel like the queen of a city. She felt tired, alone, and maybe a little afraid. Later that afternoon, she took a break and walked down to the lobby. She needed coffee, strong coffee. The elevator doors opened. She stepped out and headed toward the cafe inside the building. But something made her stop. On the bench by the window, she saw the janitor again, Daniel. He was reading a thick book, a business book. She blinked. Maybe she was seeing things. Why would a janitor read that kind of book, she thought. She almost laughed. But then he looked up and saw her watching. He nodded. She quickly looked away and walked off. That night Daniel stayed late to clean the offices upstairs. He noticed a phone on the floor by Clara's desk. Someone must have dropped it. He picked it up and saw the screen was still on. A message had popped up. He read one name, and he froze. It was her father's name, a name he knew very well. The man who had closed his father's small store years ago. The man who had left his family with nothing. Daniel slowly placed the phone on the desk. He stood there for a moment, looking at the city lights through the window. So this was the daughter of the man who took everything from him. And now she looked at him like dirt under her shoes. But he was not angry. Not yet. He was thinking. Maybe this was just the beginning of something new. Something strange. Something important. As he left the room, he looked back one last time. She was rich and powerful. He was just a janitor. But sometimes, things change. And people are not what they seem. The next morning the sky was still dark when Daniel walked through the back door of the building. His uniform was clean but old, and his shoes had new tape on them. His eyes looked tired but calm. He held a small paper bag with breakfast for his daughter and a note she had drawn with crayons. It said, "Good luck, Daddy," with a smiling son. Daniel placed the bag on the shelf in the supply room and took out his tools. He had not told anyone about the message he saw on Clara's phone the night before, but the name still echoed in his head like a bell he could not unring. Clara's father was the man who closed down the small hardware shop owned by Daniel's family. It was the only shop on the street where people could buy nails and paint and screws and light bulbs all in one place. Daniel's father had built it with his own hands. Daniel used to sit on the counter and help count coins. Then, one day the big company came in. Prices dropped. Bills stacked up. And soon the shop was gone. That was when Daniel learned how fast life could fall apart. He also learned how to clean, how to cook, how to hold a crying baby while fixing a broken sink. Now here he was, washing windows in the same building run by the daughter of the man who helped destroy his family's dream. But Daniel did not hate her. He did not believe in hate. He believed in work, in quiet steps, in second chances. Upstairs, Clara sat at her desk, holding a hot coffee she had barely touched. She had not slept well. Something about the janitor's face kept showing up in her mind. The way he looked at the phone. The way he looked at her. It was not fear. It was not anger. It was something else. She opened her laptop and checked the numbers again. They still looked wrong. Her hands moved across the keyboard. She fixed one thing and broke another. Time was running out. The meeting with investors was in 2 days and nothing felt ready. She leaned back in her chair and stared at the ceiling. For a moment she thought she heard her father's voice telling her to toughen up, to stop acting weak, to never ask for help. Then she saw something strange on her desk. It was a small folded paper. She looked around. No one was in the room. No one had come in. She opened it slowly. Inside were 5 words written in simple black ink. "You are not your father." Clara blinked and read it again. "You are not your father." Her heart beat faster. Who wrote this? Who knew what she was thinking? She stood up and checked the door. It was locked. She walked to the window and looked down. The streets were full of moving cars and tiny people with busy lives. She felt very small for a moment. Down in the hallway, Daniel moved quietly. He had left the note, not to scare her, but to give her something he never got when he was younger. A kind voice in the middle of fear. He did not know if she would read it. He did not know if she would care. He only knew she looked like someone carrying a heavy weight. And sometimes, even powerful people break. That evening Clara told her assistant to check the security cameras. She wanted to know who left the note. The assistant came back an hour later, shaking her head. No one had entered. No one had been seen. Just the janitor walking by with his cart. Clara raised an eyebrow. The janitor. Later that night, she walked to the supply room. It was empty. She looked around. Brooms. Buckets. A small notebook on the shelf. She almost picked it up, but stopped herself. That would be crossing a line. The next morning Daniel found a yellow sticky note on his cart. It said, "Did you write that?" He smiled, folded it, and placed it in his pocket. He did not answer. Not yet. He walked through the halls like always. But now every step felt different, like he was walking into a new chapter. Clara watched him from the elevator. He moved with calm, with care, like the building was a garden, and he was the one who kept alive. She thought about the note again, and about the way no one else had ever said those words to her. Not even her own mother. "You are not your father." Maybe the janitor saw something in her, or maybe he saw through her. And that thought, for some reason, did not scare her. It made her feel seen. And that was something money had never bought her. Clara sat in her office chair, staring at the city lights outside the glass wall. The sun had gone down, but she had not moved for almost an hour. The note still sat on her desk like a voice that refused to be silent. You are not your father. She read it again and again, and for the first time in years, she wished someone would say more. The next morning began like any other, except it didn't. A second note was waiting on her desk, folded neatly like the first. This one said, "You built your company alone, but you don't have to save it alone." Clara blinked and looked around the room. The doors were locked. The cameras showed nothing. No one had come in, except for one person, the janitor. She frowned and tried to laugh it off. What would a janitor know about running a company? What would he know about investors or spreadsheets or pressure? Still, the words stayed in her head like soft footsteps behind her. Later that afternoon, she called her assistant into the room. "I want you to be honest," she said. "Is there anyone in this building who stays late every night besides me?" The assistant looked confused for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Just one person, ma'am. The janitor." Clara rolled her eyes. "That man again. He barely speaks," she said. "Probably barely reads. He's always just there, like a shadow." The assistant gave a small shrug. "He's quiet, but he's kind. He helped me carry my laptop last week when I dropped it. He even fixed the plug in the break room." Clara waved her hand. "All right, that's enough." But her thoughts would not leave her alone. She remembered the book he was reading that day. It was not a comic or a magazine. It was a business book. That night, she stayed late on purpose. She turned off the lights in her office and sat behind the door, waiting, watching. Hours passed. Nothing happened. Until almost midnight, she heard the soft squeak of wheels. The cleaning cart. Daniel pushed the cart into her office. He turned on a small desk lamp and sat in her chair. He looked calm, focused. He opened a folder on the desk. Her folder. He pulled out a few papers, took a pencil from his pocket, and started writing small notes in the margins. Clara held her breath. He was changing her presentation. She wanted to jump out and yell, but something stopped her. He was not mocking. He was not stealing. He was helping. When he finished, he placed everything back exactly where it was. He turned off the lamp, closed the door gently, and walked away. Clara waited a moment before she stood up. She walked over to the desk, opened the folder, and looked at the changes. They made sense. Clearer words, stronger numbers, better flow. Her hands began to shake, not from fear, but from confusion, and something else, respect. The next morning she did not say a word to anyone. She kept the folder, studied it, used it. Her team noticed the difference. Investors responded better. Something had shifted, and no one knew why. Later that day, another note appeared on her desk. This one said, "Sometimes the one cleaning up your mess is the only one who sees how to fix it." She read the words slowly. Then again. Then again. Down in the hallway, Daniel wiped the windows as people rushed past him. No one looked his way. No one said thank you. But that was okay. He was not trying to be seen. He just wanted to help, even if no one knew it was him. That night, Clara left a sticky note on the break room wall. It had one word. Why? Daniel saw it. He smiled. He didn't write back. The next evening, she stayed late again, this time with the lights on. Daniel entered quietly and froze when he saw her at the desk. She looked up. "So, you've been helping me all along," she said. Daniel nodded slowly. "Only if it was needed." She stood up. "Why would a janitor help a CEO?" she asked. "Because sometimes titles mean nothing. Only the work means something." She looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time, she saw not a janitor, but a man, a father, a mind, a story. She did not say thank you. Not yet. But she did not fire him either. And for someone like Clara, that said more than words ever could. Clara sat behind her desk, while Daniel stood across from her, holding nothing in his hands. No mop, no cart, no tools, just himself. She looked at him for a long time, waiting, thinking. You read my files, she said. You changed my numbers. Why? Daniel stood quietly and then spoke. Because they were wrong. And you deserve better. Clara narrowed her eyes. That's not your job. Daniel nodded. I know. But I stayed anyway. Because I saw something was broken. And no one else was trying to fix it. Her hands tightened on the arms of her chair. You think you're smarter than me? She asked. No. I think you're tired. The words hit her like wind through glass. Soft but sharp. She opened her mouth to answer, but nothing came out. Daniel stepped back. I can leave. I know you didn't ask for help. I won't touch anything again. Clara stared at him. She wanted to be angry. She wanted to shout. But the truth was, she didn't feel angry. She felt seen. And that made her uncomfortable. Leave, she said quietly. Daniel nodded and turned toward the door. Just before he walked out, she spoke again. Did my father hurt you? He paused for a moment, then turned back. Not just me. He hurt a lot of people. But I don't blame you for that. And then he left the room. That night Clara sat alone with the city lights behind her. She looked at the papers Daniel had edited. His changes were careful, simple, but powerful. She remembered how people had laughed when she first started her company. She remembered how her father told her she would fail. She remembered the way he called workers like Daniel invisible. But Daniel was not invisible. He saw everything. And he cared more than people paid to care. The next morning, she walked into the office early. The building was quiet, empty. She left a note on Daniel's cart. Thank you. That was all it said. She thought he might say something back. But he never did. 3 days passed. No more notes. No more changes. Daniel came. He cleaned. He left. Clara's meeting with the investors finally arrived. She stood in the boardroom with 12 eyes staring at her. She opened the folder and froze. Her version of the pitch was gone. In its place was the version Daniel had worked on. Stronger, cleaner, braver. Her breath caught in her chest. She looked around the room. Everyone waited. She closed her eyes for a second, then began to speak. The words flowed. The story made sense. Her voice did not shake. When it was over, the room stayed quiet. Then the lead investor stood up. This is the strongest presentation we've seen this year. Clara smiled and nodded. But deep down she knew. The credit did not belong to her alone. Back at her desk, she found a new note. I said I wouldn't help again. But I lied. Because you were worth it. She stood there, holding the paper. And for the first time in years, her eyes filled with tears. That evening, she went down to the supply room. Daniel was there cleaning a bucket. She held out the note. You said you wouldn't help again, she said. He looked up and gave a small smile. You looked like you needed it. She crossed her arms. Why me? Because no one sees you. But I did. Clara felt something break inside her. Not in a painful way, but like a wall slowly falling. My father ruined your life, she said. And you still helped me. Daniel nodded. Because I don't want to become like him. She looked at the floor. I never wanted to become like him either. Silence filled the room. Soft and heavy. You're different, he said. She smiled. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just finally ready to change. Daniel picked up his mop and turned to go. She called out, Daniel. He stopped and looked back. Thank you. He nodded once, then walked out into the hallway. Back to his world of quiet and motion. Back to being the man no one noticed. But now, Clara noticed. And something inside her had changed forever. Clara stood in the center of the boardroom, surrounded by smiles and handshakes. Investors praised her ideas. They clapped. They nodded. They said things like powerful pitch and bold move and very promising future. But as the noise grew louder in the room, something inside her felt quiet, empty even. She had won. She had saved the company. She had done everything her father once said she could not. But she knew she had not done it alone. She walked back to her office and closed the door behind her. The silence wrapped around her like a heavy coat. She opened the folder again and looked at the edits. Every red line, every correction, every smart idea came from the man she once called just a janitor. She sat down and wrote a short letter. Not a note, not a sticky paper, a real letter. It said, "You are more than your title. You saved something I almost lost, and I would like you to work with me." She placed the letter in an envelope, wrote Daniel's name on it, and carried it down to the supply room herself. Daniel was not there. She left it on his desk next to the broom, then walked away without saying a word. That evening, Daniel came in and found the envelope. He opened it slowly, read each word twice, then folded it and placed it in his pocket without a smile. The next morning Clara waited in her office. But Daniel did not come. Not that day. Not the next. Not even the day after that. She asked her assistant, "Did the janitor quit?" "Yes, ma'am. He left a few days ago. Said he found something better." Clara felt a strange ache in her chest. She had offered him more, but he walked away. She tried to forget, tried to focus on work, tried to move on, but his absence was louder than his presence ever was. 2 weeks passed. One afternoon, her assistant came in with a printed article from a small business site. Clara, read the title. "Single Father Launches Startup to Help Parents Find Work." She froze. The name was there. Daniel Pierce. She read every word. He had opened a small service that helped single moms and dads connect with jobs that fit their schedule. He had hired 3 people already. He worked out of a tiny office above a bookstore. Clara leaned back in her chair and let out a breath she did not know she was holding. She whispered, "You really did find something better." Later that week, she left her building and took a cab across town. She found the bookstore, climbed the stairs, and saw the small sign on the door, "Bright Futures Employment, helping parents build a better life." She knocked once, then again. The door opened. Daniel stood there holding a coffee mug and wearing a worn-out sweater. He looked surprised, but not shocked. Clara gave a small smile. "So this is where you disappeared to?" Daniel nodded. "I didn't think you'd come." She looked around the small room. It was warm and full of papers and whiteboards and kids' drawings on the wall. "You built this," she said softly, "for my daughter, and for others like her." Clara handed him a folder. No fancy letter this time. Just numbers and ideas. "I want to invest," she said. "Not as a CEO, just as someone who believes in this." Daniel looked down at the folder, then back at her. "Why?" "Because you saw me when no one else did. Now I want to return the favor." They sat down at the small table and talked for an hour. Not about deals, not about power, but about life, dreams, people. When Clara left, she felt something new. Not power, not pride, but peace. She had failed in some ways. She had fallen. But she had risen too. Not because of money, not because of success, but because of a man with a mop who saw beyond the surface. Weeks passed, and the city moved as it always did. Cars rushed through busy streets. Phones buzzed. People hurried in and out of tall buildings. But inside one small office above a bookstore, something different was growing. Daniel's tiny startup was no longer tiny. He had hired 5 more people. Mothers, fathers, hard workers who had been ignored for too long. They sat at old desks with cracked chairs and smiling faces. They drank cheap coffee and shared big dreams. They were building something that mattered. Across town, Clara's company was doing better than ever. The investors were happy. The numbers looked good. But Clara no longer cared about numbers the way she used to. She had started going home earlier. She had started smiling more. And every weekend, she visited Bright Futures. Not in a black car with tinted windows. Not in a power suit with a fake smile. But in jeans and a sweater. And sometimes with cookies. She never told the press about her visits. She never bragged. She didn't need to. Daniel always greeted her with the same calm voice. He didn't bow. He didn't flatter. He simply pulled up a chair and said, "Let's work." They made plans together, shared ideas, argued sometimes, laughed more than they expected. One Friday evening, Clara was helping organize resumes when a little girl ran into the office. She had 2 braids and paint on her hands. "Daddy, look what I made at school," she shouted. Daniel smiled and picked her up. "This is my daughter Emma," he said. Clara knelt down and looked at the drawing. It showed a tall building, a small house, and 2 stick figures holding hands. "Is that me?" Clara asked. Emma nodded. "You help my daddy. He helps people. So you're like a team." Clara's heart felt warm in a way it never had before. Later that night, as she walked back to her car, she stopped to look at the city lights. For years she had chased this view, thinking it would make her feel powerful. But now, it just looked like lights. The real view, the real success, was in a small upstairs office with chipped paint and real people. She remembered the first time she saw Daniel, mop in hand, eyes low, invisible to her. And now, he was the one who taught her what strength really looked like. Not power, not wealth, not pride, but purpose, kindness, quiet courage. The next morning, Clara stood in front of her team at the company. She looked different, not tired, not cold, but clear. "I want to start a new project," she said. "A branch that helps parents find work with flexible hours, child care support, fair pay." Her staff looked surprised. One asked, "What made you think of this?" Clara smiled. "A janitor once helped save this company. Now it's time we return the favor." They all clapped. But Clara was not looking for applause. She was looking forward. Later that day, she texted Daniel, "It's your turn to help me now. Come teach my people how to do it right." He replied, "Only if there's coffee." She laughed. That evening, Daniel stood in her office for the first time as a guest. Not a cleaner, not a shadow, but a leader. They looked out the window together. No words, just silence and understanding. Clara turned to him and said, "You changed me." Daniel shook his head. "You were always strong. You just forgot why." They stood side by side, 2 people from different worlds, who met by accident, fought their own battles, and found something real. Not love, not yet, but something just as rare: respect, truth, and a new kind of success. As the sun went down and the lights of the city came alive once more, Clara whispered, "Never again will I call someone just a janitor." And Daniel, with a soft smile, simply said, "Good."